welcome. I am Cyril Stover. Our focus today is on a subject that is hardly understood in terms of relevance and contribution to national growth and development, particularly with regard to procurement and purchasing in the life of a nation. Now, the deficit in transparency in the running of public organizations and the high corruption index in the country make the issues all the more relevant as Nigeria looks to establishing standard ethics and values in resource management. My guest holds degrees in economics and has over 27 years experience, with 22 of them in senior management positions in general procurement. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management of Nigeria. He is the North Central Coordinator of the Institute. Currently, he is the lead consultant of Charterhouse Consulting Limited. Abdul A. Mamman comes to One-on-One today with achievements in quality and standards acceptable to the World Bank and international donor agencies tucked in his belt. Welcome to One-on-One.
Thank you, Mr. Siri.
Right, let's start this conversation from a point of view where we seek to understand what procurement practice is and how that relates with purchasing and supply.
Thank you very much. Shortly after the coming in of the administration of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo in 1999, the first committee he puts in place then was Dr. Christopher Kolade's committee to ascertain and check how well were the contracts that were awarded during the military era were done and what are the benefits derived from the huge amount of money that were expended. In the course of that, he equally met with the World Bank to assist the country in unraveling the ever negative economic decimal that we have recorded over time with regards to non-transparent process that were in place. It was discovered in the course of the study, it was discovered that contracts were awarded without being executed and payments effected. Contracts were awarded without specific design. Contracts were over-invoiced in some aspect. Contracts were made to be implemented by man, no man, and not on merit. That's who knows who. So as a result of that, it created a problem, and a study was conducted that took about 9 months. And finally, a 2-volume document was submitted to government for action. As part of the main text and annexes that gather the field work returns, then we now have the summary of findings and recommendations that was sent to government for action with a view to institutionalize some of the recommendations the World Bank made. Because World Bank being the child of Bretton Woods institution, they are there as the IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, International Finance Corporation, as well as multilateral agencies that today are helping countries in developing nations, and equally IFC, International Finance Corporation. As a result of that, the government swung into action by putting in place a structure to operationalize the recommendations for government as at then. That was when the Budget Monitoring and Price Intelligence Unit was put in place, and they were headed by one Mrs. Sobio Kwesili as at then, otherwise known as the Due Process Office. For it to be able to back and bite, the government has to forward an executive bill to the National Assembly to give it the power it demands to enable it to function properly. And when the bill went through the crucibles of legislative enactment, it was later passed into a law, and that's where we have the Public Procurement Act 14 of 2007 in Nigeria, which basically bring to fore the frameworks of both legal and institutional mechanisms that are required to push the activities of spend management in Nigeria. Like you rightly mentioned, procurement is described as a process of acquisition of goods, works, or services through understanding by the individuals, businesses, government, or public sector organization throughout the useful life of procured assets via contract. And it requires a systematic planning system that enable you know the budget you have, how well you want to spend it, and where your priorities lies. So as a result of that, a lot of things were done, and in the admissibility of the facts that actually saw to the emergence of that particular reform, government was able to create the two administrative structures known as the National Council of Public Procurement as well as Bureau of Public Procurement. Why the National Council of Public Procurement is the organ that is responsible for policy making with regards to procurement practice in Nigeria. The Bureau of Public Procurement is created by the law as the Secretariat of the Council. It is likened to what obtains in the privatization sector, where you have the National Council on Privatization as well as Bureau of Public Enterprises.
Okay.
Yes, because what the World Bank recommended was that there should be a board for public procurement, and there should be public procurement commission. But those that were in the executives of the then president decided to choose the structure that already exists in Nigeria, which was the one likened to the privatization sector. So by so doing, you have the membership of the National Council, who are for policy-making activities or laws for the good running of procurement in Nigeria. We will have the Bureau of Public Procurement, whose center focus is basically to ensure compliance with the provisions of the public procurement law in Nigeria. And there are specific areas that needed be accepted as a principle, because Nigeria, being a signatory to the Anti-Corruption Convention of the UN, was under obligation to domesticate this law. And this law, you are to domesticate it without compromising any of the principles.
Right.
Yes, and the principles are basically about competence, consistency, about accountability, about probity, about transparency, ethical standards, and so on and so forth. The government of Nigeria was able to lay its hand on some of the documents that are required to effectively utilize the little money we have for meaningful projects that will have resultant effect and declare benefits for the populace.
All right, that's good enough, and takes us to the core of what we're discussing. So this Public Procurement Act, as you say, came into being in 2007.
Specifically.
It's quite some time now. So how has the practice of procurement, how has procurement practice fared since this law came into being?
Thank you very much. Most sincerely, the World Bank, in her recommendation in the Country Procurement Assessment Report, created what is known as an advisory requirement for government to have an institute that trains and certifies professionals in this particular profession. Because procurement is a profession, no matter how you look at it. Because as part of the spend management portfolio, we used to use the word purchasing in the past. They are interchangeably used. Purchasing is used in the private sector, while procurement is used in the public sector. And more sincerely, the birth of procurement as a word that most people seem not to understand is that it's a military word that came into being in 1874, coined by the American Navy. It's a strategic word that is used for purchase, because the actual job that procurement does is purchasing.
I see.
Yes. So as a result of that, when it came into being, the then president saw it as a means of enhancing the practicability of what is required to manage the procurement system for a country, and decided to pass the law to establish the institute as recommended by the World Bank, now the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management of Nigeria, because the name also relates to what obtained in United Kingdom as at then, because we have Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply in UK, okay, and now Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Because if I should tell you, Mr. Cyril, Nigerians were the one that went ahead to instigate the change in their name, that they want those from outside the shores of Nigeria to come over and give a different narration and different publishing on issues of implementing the public procurement in Nigeria. We now ask them that if you go through the gamut of the entire report, you'll find no any other institute that is mentioned by the study recommending government to support with the Establishment Act, which was what was done to the institute I belong. And since then, we have trained and retrained people to actually contribute their quota into the development and the practice of the profession. But shortly after it was done, my goodness, a lot of people become interested, and procurement process become messed up.
But you say it's a profession.
Absolutely.
So for those who practice, they must be professionals.
That's exactly
So
the truth.
not anyone.
Yes, not
can
anyone.
become a
Because even
procurement
in the report, the World Bank stated, country procurement assessment report, I can make a copy available for you for study. This states that there is tendency for people to believe that procurement can just be performed by any person. But they found that, in the long run, that it isn't so. It's a profession in its own. And professionals must be given the leverage and opportunity to practice their profession.
Let me relate that to you personally, because you are a professional. Matter of fact, you are a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management of Nigeria.
Correct.
But then your degrees are in economics. Both your first and second degrees are basically in economics. And we look through and find that there isn't specifically, as of now, any institution, or very few institutions, perhaps I do not know about them, that offer direct courses in the matter of procurement, purchasing, and supply.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I first of all became a student in the accounts department. I studied accounting from the details of my resume, and I went to study economics as well. Then finally, I had my first degree in economics, and another first degree in procurement and supply chain management is there.
Okay.
So, and before then, it is only University of Lagos that over time, in conjunction with other relevant institutions that were offering courses in purchasing and supply, the first institution in Nigeria that offers course-related purchasing and supply was Kaduna Polytechnic. But because of this dichotomy on polytechnics, certification and all this, and that's where practical aspect of any division or a career that is made is studied to the letter to ensure that you get value in terms of the knowledge base that is required. Okay. So in the Polytechnic, then the Polytechnic Ibadan. But people tend to play down on the graduates that hold HND from these institutions. They are well endowed and knowledgeable, and they are doing very well in their chosen career. But what happened is this, that at the end of the day, I did this, and I had my master's from Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University as far back as in the year 1999.
Right.
Because what happened is with special bias on international business. Because procurement is business related. It's a thin line that separates procurement from public finance management portfolio. Because it just have to do about effective planning system to prioritize requirements and go further into actualizing your requirements based on established principles and procedures. That's what procurement stands for. So by so doing, my understanding, my study of international business gave me a wider opportunity to get to know that. And since then, I became a fellow of the Institute because of my contribution. I had been a trainer and continue to be a trainer in this field for the past 25 years. So that one gave me an opportunity to have a ground knowledge of what is required in all ramifications. In fact, it is usually procurement and supply chain management. Because if you look at the world today, when there was COVID-19, what were the songs that a lot of countries were singing? Disruption in supply chain. Okay. The disruption in supply chain affected all businesses. Because if you are a producer of any product, the ability for you to move it to the market and have a good market share, for you to know where it is required, the quantity is required, without allowing it to meet the decoupling point, makes you a qualified procurement person, because you are planning for a specified market that you already understand and you agree with. So that's the essence.
Okay, so in your response to the earlier question, you admitted that at some point in time, the procurement practice became almost an all-comers affair, and standards degenerated. And that's how it's been since the law came into being. So what has been done to now steady procurement practice, place it back on the path it should be?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, as procurement, like I did mention earlier, is a specialized field of study. And over time, if you go through the country procurement assessment report, I go back again, that procurement is a process of acquisition. It's not the acquisition itself. Okay. A process of acquisition. And it has an interplay of several experts in the field that comes in, but under the supervision of the procurement professional. That's the way it is practiced all over the world. For example, we have the engineers, we have the quantity surveyors, we have the architect, we have several subdivisions of engineering profession. They are sector specialists, that's what they are called. Because when you look at things, you need to divide the understanding into a meaningful structure that will enable you progress further. How? There are people we call procurement professionals, and there are people that we call professionals in procurement. Procurement.
Okay, let's start, just take a while there.
Okay.
Professionals in procurement.
Yes.
And procurement professionals. What's the difference here?
Yeah, a procurement professional is one that had gone through a prolonged study in procurement and had been lettered and had passed through the test and examination that is granted, and at the end of the day qualified to practice as a procurement specialist.
Right.
And by so doing, you will be certified with the relevant institute established by an act of government which is recognized, which is the Chartered Insufficient and Supply Management in this guide. Then when you talk about professional procurement, an architect, a quantity surveyor, a civil engineer, a structural engineer is an expert in a different field. That's professional in their own field. But they have a particular function to perform when you are carrying out any procurement that has relevance to their various expertise.
Right.
That is the way it is. But in Nigeria, they wobble it. Because one, you find out that in engineering, engineering is a distinct and respected profession. But what we have, it is about is a branch of science and technology that talks about build, talk about machine production, talk about structures and building and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
While the practice of engineering deals with invention, deals with building, deals with trying as much as possible to put up structure and make sure that the practicability of what you are doing answers to the requirement of that particular area of concern, making sure that basically it is in line with safety code and standard. While as a professional procurer, all you need to do is to ensure that you gather the submissions that were brought in by contractors, for example, service providers and consultants, analyze them, use the basic elements that are required. By the time you are doing evaluation, you call in the experts in that field that is required of procurement to help you take informed decision. Their expertise advice will help you marry it with the professional knowledge you have in procurement to enable you make informed decision by choosing the right and qualified contractor, service provider, or consultant to offer the service.
And that is where most of the problems arise in public procurement in this country, which has persisted over the years.
You are quite correct, because up to now, the law, the Public Procurement Act, has been violated right from day one since 2007 by successive administration. That's why we are pleading with the current administration of President Mallam to right the wrongs and ensure that the right things are done. How? The very first chapter of the law, of the Act, Public Procurement Act, have been violated. Because the National Council on Public Procurement that's supposed to churn out policies to guide procurement conduct in Nigeria have not been inaugurated till this moment. The only effort, significant effort we saw that happened in this country was on, in February 2017, that the immediate past administration made a move and wrote to the identified members of the council to forward their representatives for inauguration. And letters were issued out. The next day, nothing happened again. We don't know why it is so. Because the council is basically responsible for policy making to guide procurement. I'll give you a typical example. Where we talk about threshold approval limit for chief executives, it is not a matter of going to the National Assembly or anyone. It is between the Bureau and the council. Because I'm privileged to be one of those that were crafters of the law, the Public Procurement Act for the country. Because Chiba Oshemusi, the former procurement specialist of the World Bank, and myself actually consulted for the Senate in the passage of the law. Then, as a result of that, the nitty-gritty, we are borrowing a convention that is already existing in the UN countries, and we are domesticating it. Look, in engaging the Director General of the Bureau of Public Procurement, it requires that one must be having adequate and relevant professional qualification of not less than 15 years. And such an individual must be taken through competitive selection process. And the most suitable among them will be recommended by the Council for Government for approval as the DG. But today, ever since, we've been having DGs, and they are not irrelevant or in line with the provisions of the law as professionals in this field. That had been the problem. If you are not productive in a field, you will be destructive, because any attempt to try to open up areas where there are gaps, you will be closing it. You will never allow it to happen. That is to answer to exactly your observation that you made. Because that's why every Tom, Dick, and Harry are in procurement, all in the name of procurement, not understanding the fundamentals, the knowledge, the technicalities that are involved. And unless you allow people to do that, look at the US, for example. When Obama came to office, the 44th president of the United States of America, what did he do? He called on Mr. Cohen, who happens to be a chartered purchaser, as at then. And what did they saw the areas and did analysis and identified that one of the areas they need to slow down and cut the budget to ensure that there is efficient management of funds was in defense. And at the end of the day, he was able within a year to cut down $40 billion. When Trump came, he also tried as much as possible. It's only his own that is the jack and boot system of administration that he did in US, where people are forced to do something by force. The power of US behind international business. It doesn't occur like that unless I have to situate a very narrative that will appeal to your mind to deal with me when you talk about business. If not, I will be having my card that I will use to check you and keep it beside me. When the time comes, I'll put it on the table and you don't have anything to defend yourself. So what did happen in Nigeria is that up to this moment, we have director generals of the Bureau, one after the other, that they were engineers. They are not professionally trained and certified as required by law. And the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management Law on part 4, section 1189 states that no one shall head any purchasing and supply chain management of any organization. That's the law passed by the National Assembly, unless you are a member of this institute qualified by examination. Just like you cannot practice and refer to yourself as an accountant except you are either chartered by ICANN or ANAN, then so also in the engineering field by CORIN, so also in architects and so on and so forth. But in procurement, people tend to politicize it, look at it as a place to make money. And when people come with such conviction, what we are seeing today is exactly what will happen. And that's why the country keeps going down, despite the huge amount of money government is pushing into procurement. For infrastructural procurement, what are the values that are derived from it? We cannot specifically measure it.
And that's exactly the next question I was going to go to. And when you have such institutions of the state that are meant to provide professional services, how come we still hear this very high incidences of procurement-related corruption in government establishments? I'm not even going yet to the private sector, but let's start with public institutions.
Like I did mention, government is the largest spender of funds in any society. And they are the biggest employer of labor. You also know, the federal government, for example. And as a result of that, whatever the federal government does, the state will equally cash in on it and ensure that they have a structure that can work, which is even workable. But what now happens is that if you violate the provisions of an act, automatically it will trickle down beneath the levels of governance. And that's exactly what had happened, because what we are saying is this. The law that established the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply requires one, for you to be in practice, to be a member of the institute qualified by examination. You can be an engineer, you can be an architect, you can be a quantity surveyor, but for you to practice procurement, go through the prescribed examination, and then when you pass, you will be given the opportunity. But the people we are having currently today were trained by BPP for 3 weeks. You can imagine a workshop. And they are issued certificate. BPP is not a satisfying institution. It's not established as an institute. It's rather an agent of government and secretariat of the council.
This becomes interesting, because I was just going to say to you, I do know that in many government establishments, public institutions, you have those who are referred to as procurement officers.
Yes.
And they're all in place, and this practice goes in. Are you saying that not all of them are procurement professionals, or some may have gone through, at best,
absolutely
a
correct
workshop?
One thing that we need to know is that the ability for us to move and progress is for us to respect our laws and ensure the respect for rule of law is key in everything we do. Since the passage of the law, I wouldn't say it's a mistake. The first person that was given the opportunity to act at the DG and later at DG was trying to rewrite history by making procurement an engineering function. That was where we got it all wrong. So then trying as much as possible to correct it became a Herculean task, because people have gone to taste, and the kind of narration they are giving to it was that procurement is a place to make money.
Let me come back to your institute.
Okay.
Now, with all of these breaches,
yes,
which you've talked about,
yeah,
what has the institute, which is set up by law? What has it done to draw attention to the breaches that have been consistently taking place?
We have consistently been wanting to make sure that we practice or we operate on a very sane environment, because taking the matter to court will even open up a lot of things. For example, the absence of the Council on absence of the National Council on Public Procurement will actually dictate every procurement that have been done that passed through the certification of the Bureau, number one. And as professionals, we look at it that we meet other government agencies that are responsible for implementing this law, putting ourselves before them, explaining from time to time that this is what it means, including the National Assembly. And the National Assembly had given us a listening ear that, first and foremost, if you inaugurate the council, the institute, Chartered Institute of Procurement, is a member of the council that seeks to confer and also carry on with the management of the Bureau by virtue of policy making. But what do we have? If we resort to law, because there are people we took to court, and the matter is still in court, to make sure that we expressly get a judgment that confers on us the right based on what the Establishment Act has said, but the matter is still in court at this moment, then in order to test the viability of the law that establishes us. But coming back to the National Council on Establishment, what did we see? We come to the National Council on Establishment in 2013. The law that passed identified with the evaluation accreditation process of the Federal Ministry of Education for the certificate issued by the Institute went further to accept the certificate of the Institute into the scheme of service. Then when it was said, but there is this caveat, this certificate is, you are included into the scheme of service, but for proficiency. We've been asking them, what is the meaning of proficiency? And do you know that the dictionary meaning of proficiency is expertise? As a result of that, other professionals in other fields as experts were given opportunity to run into procurement. And we've been asking them, tell us the meaning. So you know that in National Council Establishment, you have the gathering of 36 state head of service, including director for establishment, including that of the federal. Then they now, at the end of the day, resolved that professional institute, that their certificates are definitely going to be used as for proficiency only, not to so we don't know whether we are moving forward or we are moving backward. But what specifically happened is this, that the recruitment process that we have seen to engendering good practice in procurement have been violated by engaging non-professionals in this field. And for example, look at accountant. ICANN was established in 1965. It does not have its groups, neither does it have an opportunity to remain and structurally shows their power to do what they have to do. Until 1976, when President Obasanjo came in as a military president. And one of them happens to have a place where policy can be made with regards to accounting. That was how it came, because then people with ACCA from outside the shores of Nigeria were saddled with the responsibility of accounting. You go there, you see Director Finance and Supply, Director Admin and Finance, but at least in 2001 again, when President Obasanjo came into government, there was this fight, and they took the fight to the National Assembly. As a result of that, you now have Director of Finance and Accounts. When you see that, because that's a profession on its own. So since 1965 to 2001, you can see the length of years that were used, because some persons are not trained in the technicalities and intricacies that are bent to understand the fundamentals of a profession, but they like procurement as a place where, that's why there is a mess in the entire procurement system. Because, for example, you are training people for 3 weeks. You don't allow them to go and get professionalized. They are from a different field. You will teach them the rudiments, the fundamentals of procurement, so that they will not be speaking the same language. Rather, what do? They will ask ministries, departments, and agencies to nominate persons through the Office of Permanent Secretary. And when the Permanent Secretary nominates them, you take them through a 3 weeks program on procurement, public procurement law, and then you return them back to the same Permanent Secretary. Can any of them that is returned to Permanent Secretary be able to challenge any wrongdoing with regards to procurement? The answer is no. It doesn't work like that. We told them, Biru, if you like, you can train them and convert them, then they must have professional qualification from the institute. That is the law of today.
Right.
Yes.
Interesting conversation, and we'll continue after this time out. So stay with us on One on One. We'll be back shortly.
network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and you said you are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness.
Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One-on-One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with my guest, Abdul A. Mamman, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management of Nigeria. He's, of course, the North Central Coordinator of the Institute. It's all about procurement practice. We just looked at how people get designated as procurement officers when they're actually not professionals in the true sense of the word, as you've been trying to explain to us. Another aspect I'd like to look at, as you also say, there have been so many breaches of the law. People who, as you now say, may not have been well grounded as procurement officers have performed those rules, thereby leading to losses in terms of so many things for the government. But again, the law that sets up procurement practice, doesn't it prescribe sanctions for unethical practices?
Absolutely correct. Because in the Public Procurement Act, Part 2, Section 5K states that the bureau's, part of the bureau's function is to organize training and development for procurement professionals. Unambiguous statement. Organize training and development for procurement professionals, because they envisage that those that are going to carry out the procurement are professionals that are trained to understand the backgrounds and the basic necessities of procurement. But they neglected that. On section, part 2, section 5L, it states that the Bureau should liaise with institutions, both local and international, to build capacity. But when they say you should liaise, it is not that you as an agency of government, you are not an institute established by an act, you are a secretariat. If the council were to be established, you have been taking orders in terms of guidance on implementation from the institute, being the one with other members of the council. But what did we see? As a result of these misdoings, in the Public Procurement Act, there are attendant consequences for offenses that are identified. For example, you talk about undue influence. Undue influence have resulted into billions and billions of naira went down the drain. Because when I come to you, Mr. Steriel, as a permanent secretary, and you are interested in a particular procurement window, will I be able to advise you on what I think is the best way out? The answer is no. That is not all permanent secretaries. Those who are determined to rock the boat and begin to think that it is their birthright or their right to make money whichever way to the detriment of the citizenry. So the service provision that had come up with, because procurement is an investment window. Government invests to be able to offer service and see at the end of the day deliver dividends of democracy to the citizenry. But what do we see? With all this cacophony of activities and rigmaroling and political engendering and all this and that, it has created lull in the activities of procurement. One, the Bureau, for example, is the one that identifies to train. They conduct the training. They give them certificate, which is null and void. Then they equally went ahead to post them by mobilizing them to ministries, departments, and agencies. It is still the same Bureau that goes there on their own to check on their performance, evaluation. Then it is still the same Bureau that will go and do procurement audit to audit their function. Because, and at the end of the day, what are we talking about? By the time you raise a set of people that could not deliver on their assignment, what will come to be is this: where they lack the capacity, they always want them to run back to the Bureau You can understand what I'm talking about. And a lot of things happens as a result of that. That if you allow the trained, certified professionals to carry on their job, then they'll be able to guide the accounting officer, the permanent secretaries, because they are to be held responsible for every procurement act that is done under their supervision. So if they know the essence of that, every permanent secretary will now be asking for a professional procurement person, because it is on a dual way. One, they can be sanctioned if they do anything within the office, and equally they stand to lose their certificate as a professional person. Those things will ring bells in the minds of these people, that if you are in a particular field of endeavor and you are certified, you must keep to the professional ethic code. And in doing that, you are exemplarily trying as much as possible to give service in line with established protocols. But that's not what we have in Nigeria. And we've been saying it. We are calling on this government through this particular measure to ensure that if they are going to engage, for example, there was this particular advert that came up on the 7th of August, 2023, just the last 2 weeks. It's contractors, you can imagine, they call themselves Contractors Association of Nigeria. They were advising the current president to place an engineer, to engage an engineer to head the Bureau of Public Procurement again, whereas the current person that is there is a quantity surveyor. You can see where we are getting it all wrong. How could contractors be interested in who be the Director General of the Bureau? What? Have we gone that low? What is the meaning of that? What are you trying to tell us? What conspiratorial theory are you trying to bring forth to see how people are getting it done? That in fairness to some states, for example, because I know with the economy of the country, it is not just only the federal. The states also play a role. And in playing this role, there are states, Adamawa, Lagos, Ogun, Plateau, as well as these other states, I've forgotten this, I will remember, they have professional persons in place. And when you go to check their procurement books, you will see fine entries and fine conduct in line with established rules and regulations. But at the federal, so many states, because if you know the recklessness of the state governors, I had the privilege of discussing with some governors in the past, that you do not need to take the money that is meant to the local government. All you need to do is for you to ensure that every local government chairman, through their staffers, are able to establish plans on what they need, what they want to achieve. And once they do that, you will be able to fund that through their allocation and ensure that you play a supervisory role by having a desk in your office that goes to check every of the projects they are to do in local government. And as a governor, you go and commission. And because of the level of illiteracy in the country, hardly will the people in the community knows who actually carry out the procurement, the establishment of such project. But rather, they will now be praising governor. Because if you develop the rural area, you are developing the whole country, because that's where it starts from. The rural and urban migration will reduce. And insecurity that we are having today wouldn't have been, because if, for example, the local contractors in a community are given the privilege, there are those, if you go through the length of road that leads us from here to Lafia, you will see women who are toiling day and night to break rocks and then turns them into chippings, and they are necessarily required in construction work. As a result of that, if those people are engaged to be supplying this, rather than somebody going far to supply those things to carry out job in a particular state, it is not acceptable. The World Bank brought about SIFTAS project, which is specifically meant to ensure that the micro and small enterprises in Nigeria are brought in, because that is the new thing all over the world. But our people are not listening. The governors could have the money of the local government work for them if they deploy the right perspective of procurement practice. But they are not. A good number of them, not all of them. But as a result of this, we have taken the initiative to try to dialogue with them and make sure that the law that is passed, a good number of them just pass it without implementing it to the ladder. Governors are the ones that are chief procurement officers in their state. They decide what happens. That's why they recklessly waste the money that you have, because they are not seeing any supervision that is effectively important to put them in the proper perspective. Because if they know that public office is for public good, and the money that you have from public fund is for use for the benefits of the public, I think every one of us will think right.
Now let's return to the matter of training of procurement professionals in the country. In the past, there were few institutions that offered direct or related courses. What's the situation now? How improved is it?
Yeah, as of today, several universities have come into the fore to carry out procurement and supply chain training. Even To our knowledge today, specifically in the year 2021, in August 2021, the National Board for Technical Education, as the body that makes and establishes technical institutions in Nigeria, had also changed the nomenclature of purchasing and supply to procurement and supply chain management.
Okay.
Because that is where we derive. Because if you look at the old system, before the reform came into being, what obtains then were, one, you have the supplies division in most MDAs, as well as the Federal Tender Board. That was what was merged together in 2007 to form the procurement, without any order coming in. Because in the old, when you asked them, they said, okay, specifically, what are the store officers, for example, they are known for? What are they doing in procurement? How can they come into procurement? They had forgotten one thing. They are the one that established the need for an item before. Whereas, as a result of out of stocks or stocks available as stock control mechanisms, they are the one that goes ahead to ensure that this special control on items that are in store are duly allocated as at when due. Then that particular function has now been subsumed under procurement, because store is a subdivision of procurement. If they study it, it's a subdivision of procurement. Why procurement now is about establishing the need as a starting point.
We're learning a lot about this, and a lot of these were taken for granted in the past. And
Yes.
if I recollect, you mentioned in speaking earlier something about a difference in rule in public financing as well.
Yes. Exactly, because what do I mean by that? 18 line divides procurement and financing, because they all belong to a model called the Public Finance Management Portfolio.
Right.
And what do I mean by that? Because the budget, you see, procurement consumes about 75 to 80% of any organization's budget, because it's either you are procuring goods, works, or services. So that's why up to 80% goes in there.
And that's the attraction.
That is the attraction for all this that is happening. So, and as a result of that, you equally understand that the 75 to 80% of the fund that everybody from top till bottom are interested. And we come to the realization of the fact that in the country today, when you are talking about procurement, everybody look at themselves as the person that should be there. Anybody can do whatever they like, but at the end of the day, who suffers? It is we, the citizenry, that suffers. Because you find out that this huge amount of money that is planned, because procurement is about planning. You plan what you wish to do as a business plan, you reduce it into procurement plan, and that is what is indicated and embedded in the budget. If you are implementing budget, or you are implementing procurement as it should be, you are indirectly implementing the budget. But we keep hearing budget has not been implemented. This. What are the core elements of the budget? It is procurement of either goods, works, and services.
Nigeria is currently under a new administration, and again, as is usual, at periods like this, there is renewed talk of getting things done the right way and infusing the right ethics and values in public service. As we move along along those lines, what can your institute and professionals like you do to enhance a proper practice of procurement?
Thank you very much. The willingness of the government to do the right thing counts. And I have no doubt in renewed hope espoused by the current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR. Because one important thing is that to get the job done, you require astute professionals with the knowledge and the basic understanding of the functionality that comes with a particular career that develops into a profession. Because you went through a prolonged examination, that is the attribute, skills, as well as vocation, that have been identified. For example, the National Assembly, being a body created by the Constitution, is empowered under Section 27 to identify skills or that will be able to be given the specialty in terms of what they have to say, skills and vocation. And at the end of the day, certify that these are what wants to be, what is good to be an institute. Today, what we are asking the government to do is to ensure that all this mushroom procurement training they have conducted, we are not sending people away, but they need the professional training. Because procurement has an interplay of experts. And those who are already professionals in the field, like the Bureau, they are not here. You can call them to come and testify. They have been sending letters to MDA's chief executive not to allow professionals to be put in procurement if they are there, unless the ones that is trained by them.
Okay.
So what we are asking this government to do is to ensure that the right perspective are done, and on engaging the Director General of the Bureau, after the expiration of the term of the current Director General, it must be for professionals in this field, and they will be taken through competitive selection process so that management of resources will be at the best, so that the country will continue to have an opportunity. You see, disengage the mind of people that thought is a place that we must be living their own first professional calling, because they are now having mid-career problems. Then they decided to venture into procurement and worsen the situation, and no value is derived, because the ultimate goal of procurement is to ensure service is provided by ensuring specifically there is value for money at the end of the day. So we are calling on the current government to also talk with the states, because the economy of the country is not just about the federal government. It's inclusive of the states and the local government. When the governors are able to take into consideration what professionalism means in procurement practice, they will get it right. Money will be available, because if you look at the entire thing, we are all crying. We have no money, we've gone to borrow. We are talking about revenue, which this current government has come to put certain things in place to enable it to implement through the renewed hope. But at the end of the day, the expenditure aspect of it, of the revenue, is what we are talking about. So people should not be made to occupy positions they are not trained and they are not certified for, so that the money will not be wasted.
Let's turn to your institute now, the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management of Nigeria. You've spoken so much about the need for training, proper certification, and for professionals to be in charge. Is the institute in a good position to ensure this kind of training that you talked about and certification of,
yes,
of professionals?
Over time, because this Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management was established in 1974 and got registered through trustees with the CAC under the Kwama law in 1984, and got its Establishment Act in 2007. You can see the journey over time. There is a body of knowledge that had over time contributed to the development of this field. But at the end of the day, the graduates of this particular institute were not given the opportunity to prove their worth in their workplace. So now, we are now saying the institute is currently having a syllabus that trains certified professionals, 18 months duration, the least, for graduates, either first degree or master's or whatever it is. You must come through the institute so that we can vouch for you, so that you can be held accountable for your actions or inactions. I don't know why people are running away. They don't want to come in. They are rather, you want to go for 3 weeks training, and you are pushed into managing a very sensitive department in an organization. Spend management. That's what we are saying. When you get it right, the structure is right, things will go well. Then what we intend doing again is that we are currently reviewing the syllabus in line with what now obtained as sustainable procurement. Let me also give you a short story that is about, in 2020, the World Bank came into Nigeria after a particular discussion they had with the NUC and the Bureau. They now introduce a course known as Sustainable Procurement, Environment and Social Enhancement Standard in the country that can train people on certificate, train people advanced diploma, BSc, postgraduate, and masters, and so on and so forth. And they were recruiting Nigerians under the world. They say, if you do that, what actually carried my anger sometime was that there was this stakeholder meeting that was called by the ABU, because 6 universities were identified in Nigeria across the 6 geopolitical zones. ABU is one. And when we got there, the representative of the NUC General Executive Secretary was there. One Dr. Atta, he came in after discussion, after the opening. He was asked to make remarks. He was just telling us that, you know, what is going to come out of this is this, that this particular program is engendered by the World Bank. If you come in here and you do the university and you go, you pass the course, then you will be at par with other professional bodies, like when people go to the university to study accountancy, either ICANN or ANAN. When any branch of engineering, you go through Corinne. But when you finish from the program, it's BPP that gives you certification. my brother, I could not hold it. After he stepped out of the hall, I went to meet him that, are you really serious with what you just said? That ICANN and Corinne are certified institute for accountants and engineering respectively. But when it comes to this, BPP is not so. BPP is an agent of government. We are an institute established by an act of parliament. We made several efforts to reach you people. You denied us. And it is not proper. And it must stop. So we agreed that we are going to meet again. To tell you what's going to happen, do you know how the narration is? Sustainable Procurement, Environment and Social Standard Enhancement Program is a specialized course that first broke out, and it was anchored on University of Turin in Italy, Torino. And in 2011, I would have been one of those to participate, but something held me back. But it's a specialized area of procurement, whereas what is it? It's about the climate change. That if you are carrying out procurement, you must ensure that it is eco-compliant, ensuring that the environment is taken care of, because whatever you are doing, your byproduct must be recyclable. And as a result of that, you should take care and ensure that you are carrying out procurement with humane mind in compliance with environmental requirements. And those you are going to engage to give you that service must also be having their own safety and environmental health activities put in place. So the aspect of the social standard is to ensure that the women, the gender, who are available should be able to be considered in any procurement decision so that they can go. But what was initiated was that, yes, Ministry of Environment should come in, bring in, develop a curriculum, then social works through the Women Development Center. They do not want to listen and get up. And Nigeria is the only country where this is happening in Africa. And it ought not to be. What we mean is that we must go on by what obtains everywhere in the world, because, like my registrar do say, A, B, C to Z is 26 alphabets. Nobody has added any other alphabets. That means everybody is copying. And when you are copying, you must copy well.
On a final note, you think Nigeria has a chance to improve on its spend management?
Yes. Nigeria has a very big chance to improve. Do the right thing at the right time. Allow the perspectives of spend management principles to be anchored within the domain of certified professionals that are trained, because they know ordinarily if you misprocure, if you do anything contrary to established protocols, you will have yourself to blame, because you'll be punished and the certificate will be withdrawn from you. And when you begin to do that, there are sanctions that have already been put in place. In our law, it is stated. In Public Procurement Act, it is equally stated that for public servants, it is 5 years or jail term or summary dismissal. And for corporate organization, it is 25% of the contract in question that you wanted to cheat the government about. Then, and again, contractors, 3 years jail term for each of the directors in that particular company. But something happened, Mr. Cyril. Immediately this particular law came into being, especially the force was given when everybody thought when in 2015 that Buhari administration was coming. I could recall, I was somewhere where people are trying to do what they have to do the right way. Then they come up with a meaning that saying that, one, most companies are owned by some directors sitting in offices to take the procurement decision. They are the chairman, the wives are the managing directors, the children are directors. Quickly, they ran to CAC to change their ownership structure. So you can understand, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a man we all know can headhunt and get the right people to be in position. Let professionalism take the lead. Let the right things be done so that the little money we are having are subject of best utilization option for the benefits of the country. If that's the case, both the federal and the state government will not be shouting and crying for money that is not available. The little available will be deployed toward providing service, and the ultimate aim is to have a beneficial outcome that basically the dividends of democracy will be declared through value money principles.
And it is on that note we end this conversation. Mallam Abdul A. Mamman, Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply Management of Nigeria and North Central Coordinator of the Institute. It's been interesting talking to you.
It's my pleasure, Mr.
Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, sir.
Right.
Thank you very much.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week we'll be back with One on One. I'm Cyril Stover. Continue to stay safe.
There's love in the air. After an audition tour of 4 states across Nigeria, it's time